Hi, everybody. This is Mark Sims.
Hi.
Hello,
Douglas.
Dr. Sims.
Sorry about being telephonic. Some things changed for me. I apologize, but we'll get through it. Okay, is everybody ready?
I think so.
Yep.
We're all ready.
All right, we're going to call the meeting to order and do roll call, please.
Do you want me to hit the go? Roll call.
Yes, please.
David Nigro,
Present.
Diane Douglas,
Present by phone.
William Gibney,
I am here.
Michael Gordon, Dean Howard, Mark Sims,
Here.
Suke Kneifel,
Here.
Shelley Herbold,
Here.
Lynn Davison is here.
Thank you, everybody. I assume that Dean Howard and Mike Gordon will join by telephone, since that's what they had indicated, but we'll go ahead. Next item on the agenda is a student presentation by Dr. Christine Lick.
Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce Courtney Fritz at this time to introduce our students and
Thank
their
you.
instructor.
Hello. Good afternoon. I'm Courtney Fritz, the principal here at the Phoenix State School for the Deaf. President Sims, I know you're on the phone. Board members here in person and on the phone. Superintendent Annette Reichman. I'm very grateful.
You're going to have to put your, get closer to the microphone. You're intermittent.
I wanted to introduce two teachers. One will be up here in a second. The other is not with us tonight, but these are the two instructors who coordinated and prepared our ASL competition this year. That's Adrian DeHoya and Steve McLeod. Adrian is here with us tonight, and he will give a brief expansion on the competition. He will also introduce our two students.
Thank you.
First, we have Matea King, and we have Zoe Abrams-Gay. So please, the three of you, if you'd come on up. Hello. As I was just introduced, my name is Adrienne, and the purpose of the ASL competition was hosted by Gallaudet University, sponsored by Gallaudet University, and Phi Kappa Zeta. That's a sorority there. And this is the second year that that's been hosted as a competition, and the theme was national literacy. So it's a literacy competition, both in writing and in ASL. The ASL competition, we had several students compete. There were different divisions for the competition. There was an elementary, middle school, high school, and life skills division. We had different students competing in those divisions. Gallaudet received over 450 submissions from schools all over the country, schools for the deaf. These two students were winners. They will be bringing a brief explanation about their experiences, about what they did, how they came up with their stories. And the theme of the ASL competition was to tell you about life on Earth in 2050. So that's what their stories were about. So we'd welcome them. Hi, my name is Matea King. I'm a 5th grader. I'm 9 years old, and I've been at PDSD for 3 years.
Hi,
My name is Zoe Abrams-Gay. I am 12, and I'm in the 7th grade, and I've been here for 10 years since I was a toddler.
The reason why we went ahead and competed in this competition was because we have a passion, not just for the passion of ASL, but ASL will always be our first and primary language.
That's right. And another reason why we're involved in this competition is because, well, both of our parents are deaf and taught us the meaning of ASL and how to cherish that. And every night when we would go to bed, they would tell us bedtime stories, they would sign to us. So of course we learn because we're deaf and it's our first language. And that's why we wanted to continue on and do the ASL competition. It's really the key to the way we communicate.
So I decided to come up with the topic, and the topic of my story was making your life easier. And I didn't just decide on that for no reason. It was based on my own experience and on my friends' experience, which I can elaborate on. So today, it's 2016, today's 2017, and there's still inequalities. Deaf people are still seen as less than. But if you think about it, 30 years ago, we had no iPhones, we had no other cell phones, we had no we had typewriters, but we didn't have computers or laptops or anything fancy like we do now. And then if you think about it, 33 years in the future, when we get to 2050, there will be a lot more creativity and inventions. So that's why I was thinking about make your life easier in my story. A friend of mine told me a story about something that happened during Christmas, and his family was talking and leaving him out. He was all alone. The family was talking and enjoying each other, and they just ignored him. They weren't sorry about it or anything. They were laughing together. He asked, what are you laughing about? I don't know what's going on. So I hope in the future we can fix that no family leaves each other out, that we have equal communication. That's my hope.
Right. And my experience also applied to the story that I told as well. When we have better technology, that means, if you think about before, we didn't have a way to communicate before as deaf people. And now we look at what we can do today with video phones and all kinds of technology that allows us to communicate. And if you look even further into the future in 2015, you can only imagine what could be available. So my story was about that. And I also had experience with that as well. My family actually went to a fast food restaurant, and if you have ever been to one before, you know that you can order going through the drive-thru. Of course, my mom couldn't do it because it's just a speaker where you can speak if you're hearing to order your food. But by the time you get to the window to pay for your food, it's already ready. But we don't have that opportunity as deaf person. So we have to get to the window and actually write our order. Then we have to show the person our order. Then they have to cook it, and then we finally get the food. But it's definitely not as quickly as a hearing person gets to have it. So I feel like we should have some other kind of system so that we can sign what we want, or we can have the same types of equality.
Yes. When we were filming ourselves with our teacher, with Adrienne, I have to admit I was a little bit nervous. I knew that the people worldwide would be watching me, and I was nervous, but I tried to stay optimistic. And also I knew in the back of my mind I wasn't thinking about money or about winning the competition. I was just happy to be participating because I was enjoying ASL. I was enjoying just the partaking in the storytelling part. Later on that night, I went to sleep, and my mom was acting a little bit strange the next day. And I tried to ignore it, and finally I got to talk to my mom, and she said that I won. And I got first place and the $100 prize. And again, I didn't think that I would win. I just wanted to participate, and I was so inspired by it.
And like her, I had a similar experience. when I did the video for mine, I was a little bit nervous because I knew a bunch of people were going to be watching me, but I still did my story, and we sent it off to Gallaudet, and I really didn't think that I'd win. I just kind of did it because I was enjoying it. And then one night, I went to go to bed, and my mom actually woke me up with the phone flashing in my face, and she was excited. I was a little bit confused, and I was still waking up when she was trying to show me this email that came on her phone. But then I realized it was an email from Gallaudet, and that I had won second place, and along with that, $50. And I'm so proud. I know our families are proud of us, and I was just happy to be involved with it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is Adrian. I want to let you know that we are giving them certificates. Matea won for elementary division, first place. Zoe won for middle school, second place in ASL storytelling. So I wanted to show you their certificates tonight. Oh, their checks that they won.
That is awesome. Thank you very much. That's great. Next is 1.03, call to the public for agendized items. Are there any requests to speak?
Yes, there are. Astrid Goodstein.
How is there one?
No, there's three. Two
Okay, well,
here. One has been written by Polly, and I'll read that.
all right, go ahead and read Polly's, and then we'll give 3 minutes per each other person. So please
Okay.
go ahead.
Alrighty. Honorable ASDB board members, I don't think I will be able to attend the board meeting. However, I want to say about the suggested changes of the Arizona Revised Statute, Title 15, Chapter 11. I have not read thoroughly about this revision yet, but I am really concerned of what Superintendent Reichman and Maria Murphy explained to us about the qualification at the Tucson Advisory Group meeting. Superintendent Reichman made her point that the qualification for the superintendent must be clarified before the legislature. The term, quote, the qualification, unquote, that term reminds me of the board meeting in 1993. Not too sure of that year. As the board president confirmed that the superintendent was not qualified, although his background was a field of the blind area and a good advocate for the deaf area. The board made the bad decision and announced in the media, board chose an interim superintendent from Tucson Unified School District with no background in either blind or deaf. I could have shared with you a long story about what was happened at the meeting, media announcement, and at the farewell party. Indeed, I was very upset because I knew Superintendent well and worked well with Superintendent as a member of the Total Quality Management, and school staff cooperatively worked together, arranging the strategic plan, mission statement, and vision. I was a facilitator among many groups, including administrators. I knew who was the backstabber. I make it short. Since a board chose Annette Reichman as a superintendent, don't you ever kick her out. Just because of the qualification issue. Yes, the description of the superintendent's qualification is entirely different between superintendent of 1960s and today. In fact, last time there was one school, and today's superintendent handles co-op programs, preschools, now the font gets larger, ASD, ASB, early childhood, and parent education, and ASDB agency. To the current board members, quote, don't make the same mistake. I strongly believe that the superintendent, board members, and ASDB professional staff, such as Maria Murphy and others, should review the description of the Arizona Revised Statute Title 15, Chapter 11 more carefully at the retreat or at the proper place for reviewing, and revising before bringing this up to the legislature. Polly Brady Garcia.
Mr. President, this is Kristen Rex. I need to make a quick announcement. There is a Lexus SUV parked in the bus area. It is a gold Lexus and needs to be moved for the buses. Thank you.
Thanks. It's not mine. Okay, the next person.
Astrid Goldstein? Goodstein, I'm sorry.
Hello. Hello, Chair and members of the board, and Superintendent Reichman. I am here to represent the AZAD, the Arizona Association of the Deaf. I would like to make 2 points. So the statutes that are subject to revision, I wanted to briefly talk about SB 13351. I'm seeing now and understanding that there are some obsolete words that need to be revised. I also understand that it is the board's prerogative to decide on what the qualifications are and to elect a superintendent. But I think it's important to remind ourselves that the progress that it took in leadership to select Superintendent Reichman was very inclusive, was very transparent as a process. There were several people involved in the development of those qualifications. Do you remember the public forum that we had to work on qualifications? We also worked with the board to develop job descriptions. I think that the process worked very well, and so I'd like to see that collaboration continue. I think there is some need for change in the statute, but why not make the qualifications general enough? For example, the candidate should demonstrate several of the following characteristics as possible. For example, leadership capability, communication skills, knowledge of ASL, keep it general, knowledge of ASDB's mission and goal. That way we know
1
and can
minute.
select a person. So I
1
ask you, board members, to give this further consideration, and we would like to continue the dialogue with you. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the other statute that I feel is due for revision.
Excuse me, you have about 30 seconds.
That is ASDB 1351. Oh, 30 seconds. Okay, I'll just give you a list. It includes qualification. Oh gosh, now I've lost my train of thought. The goal is to have a wonderful pool of potential candidates for the governor to select for the board. Those qualifications should include things such as knowledge, experience, and understanding of the development of the child, of deafness, of blindness, of people who are
3
hard of
minutes.
hearing.
3 minutes.
Also, board members ideally should be capable of ASL. I think another important change would be in limiting of terms. I feel that there should be a limit of 12 years. I
It's-
know I can give you a copy of my statements.
Yep. Thank
Hopefully
you.
this will be under consideration. I'd like to continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can we obtain her comments and distribute them to the board, please? I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Next, there's one more, is that correct?
Yes, Cynthia Butts. She's coming forward, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
I'll hang on to this. For the board, yeah. Do I scan it and send it? Yeah.
Okay, and again, a reminder, you have 3 minutes. I will give you a 1 minute warning.
Okay. Hello, Superintendent Sims and board members present. My comments will be focusing on 1325. And bear with me, I tried to print my comments and my printer's not working, so I'm stuck with my small font on my iPad. Astrid already mentioned most of my comments as a representative of AZAD. I'm here as a representative of the Alumni Association. So bringing change to this 1325, we want to give authority to the board, and I understand that line of reasoning, and that was due to the superintendent search process. The current rules are outdated. It seems like we can't really use those to search for a new superintendent, and so there was a need to design your own based on your own revisions. And I completely understand why you want to do that. My concern, however, is with changing and granting authority to the board. That leaves it open to interpretation. There's no specific list of qualifications. And now, with the board that we have, I thank you for your thoughtful revisions in searching and finding Superintendent Reichman. I'm very pleased with your decision. But one day, you will no longer be on the board. You will be replaced. And this could be a random person, possibly someone who's not qualified to serve on the board. And who knows how this person is going to be interpreting what their qualifications and duties are. That's concerning.
1 minute.
While this is technically a bill, if current statute says that the superintendent should be a teacher of the deaf, we should change that or update that to an administrator, a deaf administrator. I feel that that's the simple terminology that should be used. And I understand that we want to change this to keep the integrity of the superintendent's position. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. And again, if there are written comments, we gladly have them distributed to the board. Did somebody join the call?
Yeah, this is Mike Gordon. Sorry, I was delayed.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for joining. Next is 1.04, information and discussion items, executive team report. First report is by Richard Valdivia, Business Services.
Board President Sims, Superintendent Reitman, members of the board. You have before you my report, and I'd be pleased to speak to any of the issues on the report or answer any questions you might have or any other questions you might have concerning the fiscal area. I think if you look at the report, we spoke to three important issues. Number one is we awarded contracts to providers of services that the board had asked that we look into. I provide you some direction or some information that shows you where we are compared to previous years in terms of our expenditures by category. And I highlight three initiatives that the business services area is looking into for the coming years. These are the establishment around cash handling procedures. It's looking at processes to record and maintain our fixed assets so we can account for what we have in the Arizona School for the Deaf and the Blind. And creation of processes to look at available sources of funds. I've talked to a number of board members that are interested in what sources or funds are available for some of the initiatives they want to undertake. So these are things that we'll be approaching along with other initiatives of the department, but specifically in business services to see if we can improve our processes. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
I just have one question. This is David Nigro. Do we know how many children are currently being served by Desert Voices and Zimmerman Speech and Hearing Center?
I don't know exactly, Mr. Nigro, but I can get, Member Nigro, President Sims, but I can get that for you very quickly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Next is Anita Bate, Human Resources.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Rex. In your board packet is a copy of the HR report. I'd like to take a few minutes to highlight a couple of the items. In December, HR hosted a recognition event on our Phoenix campus to recognize our staff at the 800 West Washington, DVR, our Desert Valley region, and the Phoenix campus. We provided Papa John's to our employees, and we called the event, "Any Way You Slice It, You Are Awesome." The second thing we'd like to point out is that we implemented our focusing recognition on our retirees. We started this year as of July 1st of 2016, recognizing our retirees by contacting the governor's office for commendation certificates, and we put those in frames and presented those to our retirees. At this time, I'd like to make myself available for any questions that you may have.
That's great. We very much appreciate both those initiatives. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Information Technology by Paul Creasy.
President Sims, board members, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant IT Director Steve Robinson. You have our notes. I'd like to just highlight, we've started our move of the agency's email to the cloud, which will regain us a lot of hard drive space, which is pretty much a critical asset that we have. We're just running out of space to keep everything we have. Also, we've begun building 2 new student labs, one at PDSD campus, one at the Tucson campus, an ASB lab, which will be expanding with more computers, bigger screens, better technology in those laboratories. If you have any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Creasy. Next is instructional report by Dr. Kristen Rex.
Good afternoon, President Sims, board members, and Superintendent Reichman. I submitted my report to you, but I have a couple shout outs to include. The ASDB 5K in Phoenix was held this past weekend. We had about 70 participants, raising about $1,000 for the ASDB 5K Run, Walk, and Roll at Rose Mofford Park on Saturday. It was our second 5K fundraiser to help outreach efforts for the deaf and blind programs around the state. The race was sponsored by the Arizona Relay Services as well as the Arizona Cardinals, and it was very well attended and a great success. We look forward to more 5Ks in our future. Also for parents, there is in the information section of the ASDB website, if you click on information and go to For Parents, there is a parent resource portal that gives you a lot of information that can support you and your child. And finally, we use Beyond Textbooks as a way to help ensure that our students are being taught standards that are going to support them in finishing their grade level and also support on our state standard tests and assessments. And we use Beyond Textbooks as a resource. We had last year, teachers have the opportunity to write lesson plans and submit them. And last year we had 58 lesson plans that were submitted by teachers throughout the whole year. This year, when I checked in December, we already are at 78 lesson plans, and the Beyond Textbooks representatives have been very impressed with the quality of the lessons that are being written by our staff, as well as them giving this information out so other teachers around the state can use the lesson plans. So I think we're moving in a positive direction with our instructional leadership.
That's great. Thank you. Any questions? Next is, excuse me, Media and Communications by Ryan Kuchum.
Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, I have submitted my board report to you, and I'd like to go over just a couple of highlights before being available to entertain any questions that you may have. The first thing is, as an organization, we've developed tremendously in terms of becoming consumers of data to inform our decisions throughout the agency. When I first started, I implemented 3 different needs assessments, including surveys, based on the value that has added to improving operations, customer service, and the ability to support students in the classroom ultimately. That has expanded out to 14 assessments in a little over a year and a half. And so I think that the staff here at ASDB and the leadership deserve a lot of kudos that they're looking for ways to get more information to drive decisions so they can improve the quality of access for our children and ultimately student outcomes. The second thing I'd like to point out was along that vein of endeavoring to find new ways to improve the quality of education for our children. We had the opportunity to highlight one of our outstanding teachers who's always searching for innovative solutions. Her name is Amber Akagnitis, and we were able to have ABC 15 News come out from Phoenix and film her in her classroom as they used innovative technology to reach children using virtual reality as well as visual-based homework instruction. So that way even parents who are not fluent in ASL but whose children are can access homework in a very relevant and comprehensive way. So we're very excited about opportunities like that, and it was great that ABC 15 News has put us on the map in a positive way. So those are just a couple of highlights I'd like to point out, and at this time, I'd love to entertain any questions that any members of the board may have.
That's excellent, Ryan. Appreciate it very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Next will be Operations Report by Terry Pritchard.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims, member of the board, Superintendent Reichman, and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Rex. Before you have my operations report. A couple of things I'd like to point out. One is we were able to purchase 7 new buses this year, 4 for Tucson and 3 for the Phoenix campus. Also, back in October, we applied for a grant from the Department of Education for a new freezer, and were awarded the $10,400 to purchase that. At this point, I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you.
Next would be the agency report by Annette Reichman. I got it in the right order this time. I didn't make her go first.
Good afternoon, President Sims and members of the board. I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. You already have my report, so I'm just going to touch on just a few things. First, I want to touch on is that I continue to do the tour around the state here in Phoenix and in Tucson. I described some of that here. I did more within the last couple of weeks. But it's time now to start thinking about the future. I've collected a lot of informal information, talked with a lot of people, both inside the agency and outside the agency. I've talked with you, I've talked with the community. So now I start thinking about the future, really start thinking about the strategic planning process. I added some materials to just give you a sense of what the accreditation is Advanced Ed. Our 3 schools are already accredited. What we're proposing to do is something different. We're proposing to accredit the entire agency. not just the 3 individual schools. So that the whole agency becomes accountable for what we're doing and our outcomes, our results at all levels in the school. So I'm not going to go into depth with that, but as part of the accreditation process, we are starting the strategic planning. Our first meeting is next week, Thursday. We're bringing in about 60 people agency-wide to initiate the conversation about strategic planning. What is that going to look like? You may think 60 people is too many. I agree, it is too many. At the same time, we have a history of working in isolation, not communicating with each other, not sharing ideas, not really perceiving the different islands as a part of a greater whole, the statewide agency. So the intent is to bring in all of the leaders from the different groups, get them into one room and start, oh yeah, you too, ASDB, and start that conversation. And hopefully we will have smaller groups that would do actual action items. The plan is to have a strategic plan in 6 months. I don't know what that's going to happen, but we will try. You will definitely be involved with the process. There will be some conversation about that during the February 11th board retreat. So that's the most important thing that's happening. But I also want to talk about the networking with the state legislators. Mrs. Murphy is out there every day networking with the Senate folks, with the House of Representatives folks. She's calling them, making appointments. Next week, I'm meeting with 10 state legislators. I've already met with about 10 state legislators, and it's because of her work in setting up these meetings. We're not doing anything yet, it's just more a meet and greet. Hi, I am. I'm the new superintendent, just to create that initial relationship so that later, when we're ready to go back to have more substantive discussions, they already know who we are and already feel comfortable having those conversations. It's seemingly starting to pay off already, because yesterday I had to present to a hearing of a House of Representatives Appropriations Subcommittee on Education. It's just 3 representatives that talked about ASDB and our request. The governor's office actually put into their budget request an additional $800,000 specifically for the early childhood and family education program. And yesterday I spoke to that, talked about why that would have such an impact with the early childhood learning program statewide for infants and toddlers age 3, both who are deaf and hard of hearing and blind and visually impaired. And I provided some examples of both. So if we get that funding, that's a small success, and hopefully that will lead to future successes as well. And then last, I just want to mention we are having some conversations about revising ASDB statutes. We reached out to the community to ask for input, and we are getting input. You heard some of that input this afternoon. So that the other part of the conversation that we will be we will have with you as a board and with the larger community about how to update and make current the Arizona revised statutes and what we want to propose to the state legislators. And that's my report. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. So next we're moving to consent agenda items. Approval of consent agenda, consistent with board policy to include items 3.01, 3.02, 4.01, 5.01, 6.02, and 6.04.
Mr. President,
Yes.
this is Diane Douglas. I'd like to pull 3.02. And also, I'm getting a beep that my phone is low on battery, so I may have to switch over to a cell phone. So if I drop off, I'll call right back in.
Okay. Any others, or is that just 3.02?
That's it for me.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so a motion to approve consent items 3.01, 4.01, 5.01, 6.02, and 6.04. Do I have a motion?
Actually, Mr. President, this is David Nigro.
Yes.
Can we pull 3.01 off that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any others? Okay, a motion to approve 4.01, 5.01, 6.02, and 6.04.
This is Suke Kneifel. I so move.
This is
Do we have
Lynn
a second?
Davison. I second.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, they all passed. So we're going to then move to consent, or to item 3.01, State Land Trust, presented by Terry Pritchard.
Board President Sims, member of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Rex. It should be some information from the Arizona State Land Department recommending some purchase of some of our land for easement purposes. Does anybody have any questions?
This is David Nigro. My question is, we're proposing to sell some easements in some land that's held in trust for the agency. Have we independently verified that the amounts that are proposed here are reasonable and are, within the range of fair market value for those such easements?
We haven't personally, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I can get information back to the board, I believe the State Land Department has done that for the fair market value.
Okay, so there's been some sort of assessment or appraisal done?
Yes.
Okay. Is that?
And I believe there is some additional paperwork I can get to all of you after the board meeting.
Okay. Yeah, it would be helpful for me to, before I vote on this, to take a look at that, because I know it wasn't included in our agenda here, but at least for my purposes, I'd like to see that we've done our due diligence before we, vote to approve this, the sale of these easements.
I'll get that to you by tomorrow.
Thank you.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? So a motion to table this till the next meeting.
I move to table 3.01 until the next meeting.
I'll second
Could
that.
be a retreat even. So, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we will table 3.01 to the next meeting. Next is 3.02, approval of Performance Arts Center and other rental agreements.
Mr. President, this is Diane Douglas. I pulled these. I assume these contracts and rental agreements are boilerplate and there's just a template for them. But for whatever reason, that's not included in my board packet, so my intention is just to abstain.
Okay. So yeah, I assume as a future you would prefer or you would like to see the rental agreement.
Yes, or if they are all boilerplate, I believe the next section is they're pretty much all the same agreement. It's just whose name is in it. But I'd still like to see just what the general contract outline is.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions? A motion on 3.02?
I move we pass 3.02.
I second that. Lynn?
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Abstentions?
Yes, I abstain. Diane Douglas.
Okay. Opposed? Okay, thank you. So the next item for discussion is 6.01, introduction and possible discussion of policies as listed in the agenda.
Good afternoon, Board
Ms. Murphy's
President
going to
Sims.
present. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I beg your pardon. This is Maria Murphy. Good afternoon, Board President Sims, board members, Superintendent Reichman, Dr. Rex. You have before you the red lines of the policies. They were posted on the website for public comment. At this time, no public comment has been received regarding the policies. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Ms. Murphy, this is David Nigro.
Yes, sir.
I guess we can start from the beginning. In J4600, some of the proposed language is a failure to comply with the prohibition against race, et cetera.
Yes.
And I believe that probably should read, the prohibition isn't against race, obviously. The prohibition is against
Yes.
the prohibition is against discipline, suspension, and expulsion of pupils on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, disability, et cetera.
Yes, sir.
So could we make a change for that when that comes back up to the board?
Absolutely. That is the ASBA suggested language. I'm assuming that must have been an error, so I will make sure that gets corrected for final read at the next board meeting.
All right. Thank you. In terms of the term strictest confidence in that same section,
Yes,
has
sir.
that been defined elsewhere in our policies?
It has not been defined elsewhere in the policy. However, I would be very happy to see if I can find a definition from ASBA. I can work with our consultants on getting some kind of a definition of what strictest confidence is and add that in.
Okay, thank you. Also in that same policy, what's the purpose for storing the records of suspensions and expulsions in a separate file?
The purpose of storing it in a separate file is to basically keep the details of the incident in strictest confidence. So that is why we keep it in a separate physical file. I would assume, and Dr. Rex, please correct me if I'm wrong, that it could also be kept in a separate electronic file?
Yes, it's kept separate from what we usually send if someone goes to another school. You don't just send all of that. So it's kind of, it's available to the other school districts, but it's in a separate file for confidentiality.
Okay.
Predominantly.
All right, so the purpose is data segregation, essentially.
Mhm.
In terms of, you brought up a great point. In terms of when these files are stored electronically, does this regulate, or does this policy change require us to store it in a separate physical, or I'm sorry, a separate electronic file, or does it only pertain to paper files?
I believe that we would have to store it separately, whether it would be electronic or paper. Dr. Rex?
Right now, we deal predominantly in paper, so this is a transition to the technology age. So yeah, that's a good question. I can work with Paul Carisi on where do we put that it's separate.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, especially if
Gotcha.
there may be separate electronic files, they may be kept in a common database in a
Right.
application we may use in the future.
Okay.
So at least want something to accommodate for that.
I will follow up with you on that,
Thank you.
Board Member Nigro.
Thank you. The next, again, in the same policy, we have a policy that says that the student shall be expelled And then immediately after that, it says that ASDB can modify this on a case-by-case basis,
Yes.
which I don't think makes much sense. I mean,
Yes.
I think it would be more accurate to say the student is subject to expulsion, and we'll evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. And with that, because there's no guideposts in this policy to help us determine whether or not the behavior or the acts of the student would warrant the sanction of being expelled. So I'm wondering if you could produce some aggravating or a list of aggravating or mitigating factors to put in the policy so that there's some guideposts so that we make sure that the students are being treated equally for the same behavior.
I would be very happy to change that language to subject to expulsion. And then what I can do is work with Dr. Rex and my subject matter experts to come up with a list of aggravating and mitigating factors. Would you want that included as part of the policy, or would you like that included possibly as an exhibit?
I would
Yeah.
prefer it to be part of the policy
Part of
so
the
that
policy?
it helps us have guideposts when we build an evidentiary record with respect to a certain student, and it helps us make a better decision.
Does
Okay.
that bind us if an incident does occur that's not on that guidepost list with, you know what I'm saying? Like, we give a set of potentials.
Mm-hmm.
What if somebody does something that's not in that set, but also could be deemed expulsion material?
Well, these factors would be, in this case, we'd already say that the behavior is,
Okay.
I believe in this case, it's disrupting the educational
Right.
public institution. So we'd already know that offense has been committed.
Okay.
These aggravating or mitigating factors would help us determine the severity of that. Was it done for financial gain? Was it done, was there violence committed? Was it done out of a peaceful type of nonviolent protest type of thing? What's the motivation? Is there a repeat history of this? Is this a repeat offender? So it's not that a question of we determining whether or not the students should be subject to sanctions. It's just, should they be subject to expulsion? That's when we look at those other
Guiding.
attendant circumstances to figure out if expulsion is appropriate in this case or not.
And you could also state in the policy that it's not limited to these examples, but we could refer to them as examples of aggravating or mitigating circumstances.
I would be very happy to make those changes.
All right, thank you. Also in that paragraph, there's a term ASDB. I think we mean superintendent in that case.
Yes.
So we can make that change. Moving along in J5350, I think there's just a grammatical error we should say the ASDB board directs the superintendent or designee to prescribe and enforce regulations and procedures for the emergency administration of naloxone hydrochloride or any other opioid antagonist approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration, and then delete the word "be" and say "by a staff member of ASDB pursuant to section 362267." I believe that's, you might want to add ARS. I believe that's ARS, a reference to the ARS. And then let's make that a new sentence just so that it flows a little bit better. Delete that period and then say section 362267, and then continue with the rest of that sentence, administration of opioid antagonists.
And those changes have already been made, Board Member Nigro, so they will be reflected at the next board meeting.
Okay. Excellent. And finally, on the JLBD, can you explain what current policy we have with respect to restraint and seclusion?
Yes, that's a very good question, Board Member Nigro. As of right now, we have no current policy regarding restraint and seclusion. That is part of the reason why we are bringing this forward, because we think that there needs to be something, adequate safeguards put into place regarding restraint and seclusion, and that is why we're bringing it forward, because we think it's important.
Mm-hmm. And do other school districts have similar restraint and seclusion policies?
Other districts had restraint and seclusion actually as part of their student discipline policy. ASBA has recommended that that be carved out of their current student discipline policies and made its own standalone policy. However, ASDB never adopted the restraint and seclusion language in the student discipline policy. So we are just taking this and adopting it as its own standalone policy.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that history.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Actually, I did have one more on G3550. We're proposing to delete or to add a provision that the potential staff members that have expired fingerprint cards can sign an affidavit that, you know, while their new application is pending. Why are we adding that provision?
This is recommended language provided by the School Boards Association. Unfortunately, in my research, I was not able to find out the history as to why they are recommending this language. The board certainly has the ability to reject that particular language if that is something that you would like to do.
Does this situation arise often?
No,
we have
I do not believe it does. Perhaps Anita might be able to answer. Do we deal with expired fingerprint cards very often? How frequently? 2 or 3 a year.
2 or 3 a year?
Okay.
Okay. Does this provision give the agency adequate protection, in your opinion?
In my opinion, the ability to sign the affidavit? That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Possibly. So I'm hedging my bets.
That's an attorney's answer.
Yeah.
I guess we won't really know unless somebody decides to challenge us on this.
I suppose that question was to others as well. Okay. Those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question.
Any other questions?
I have a question. This is Shelley.
President Sims,
This
is
is
Diane
Shelley.
Douglas.
Do you remind the employee as soon as their fingerprint clearance is about to be expired? Send any reminders?
It's my understanding that yes, multiple reminders are sent out that their fingerprint clearance card is about to expire.
Okay.
Diane, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, I just had a general question on the different personnel policies that are being recommended or changed. I was wondering if they are recommendations of ASBA, or are they in compliance or in alignment with recommendations from ADOA, general to state employees, particularly on vacation time or leave time, anything like that? Or do we create our own guidelines?
President Sims, Superintendent Douglas, that's an excellent question. Because we are not a System A personnel agency, we have flexibility to adopt policies that are similar, that are ASBA recommended when it suits us to follow ASBA's recommendations, and to follow ADOA when it is better for us to follow ADOA's recommendations. I believe in regards to the leave policies, we are following ADOA's recommendations.
Okay. The other quick question I had was looking at the different policies for suspension and student discipline, and I'm thinking back to my school board dates. I know we as a board used to receive suspension reports. I don't recall if that was required by law. I assume it was. Does this board ever receive information like that? I don't recall ever seeing it. You know, if a student, the names had to be redacted, but generally we would know how many, what the offenses were, things like that.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Rex on this.
I was told that in the past, yes, that has been a list that was sent to board members. I am not sure if it was a rule or a practice, but it has not since I've been here.
No,
At this point in time, that's what I know.
no.
Okay, so you would know.
It has not
Okay.
occurred as long as
Personally.
I've been on the board. It's
Okay.
Mark Sims
Yeah.
here.
maybe that's something we can discuss at our board retreat if that's something that's of interest to the board. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. President, Ms. Murphy, and Dr. Rex.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Marie Murphy, still on up at the dais. 6.03, action item, introduction and approval of suggested changes to Arizona Revised Statute Title 15, Chapter 11.
Okay, and if you all will please excuse me for one moment, I'm going to go grab my papers and come right back.
Okay.
President Sims, board members, you have before you my abstract as well as my recommended changes. I would like to let you know that these recommended changes were done in consultation with Superintendent Reichman, with Dr. Lamer, the executive team. We also sought out the feedback of the superintendent's advisory groups. And at this time, I will open myself up for any questions or comments.
Any questions?
Yes, Ms. Murphy, with respect to 151325, why do we need these changes?
So that's a very good question, Board Member Nigro. This has been an issue that I think has been kind of percolating around ASDB for, I would say, probably the last 20 or 30 years. It periodically bubbles up and then it goes away. One of the reasons that we were looking at changing this particular language is in order to grant the board the authority, the flexibility to determine what the superintendent qualifications are. The language that is included in the red line revisions actually mimics Title 15, Chapter 15, 503A1, which is for other school boards and their ability to select their superintendents. So it was really done with an intent to try to give the board maximum flexibility in selecting what are the appropriate qualifications for a superintendent.
So then the idea is that, I mean, in my reading, and let me know if your reading is different, but my reading of this is that this imposes an obligation on the board to go through some sort of process to produce qualifications that then they will then hold themselves to selecting superintendents. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, sir.
And the qualifications that already exist in the present version of the statute, can you help me understand why that's inadequate and why the board needs to create different qualifications?
Certainly. So it talks about specifically the superintendent, and it says that he shall be a person, he or she shall be a person who's a competent educator of the deaf or the blind, or a person who educates multi-disabilities, the sensory impaired, also acquainted with school management and class instruction of the deaf or the blind. When you look at that statutory definition, I think potentially an argument could be made that our current superintendent maybe does not qualify under a strict reading of this particular statute. But I think that we would all argue that the recruitment process surrounding Superintendent Reichman's hire was very thorough, very open, and she's doing a great job. I don't think anybody would argue that she lacks the qualifications or that she lacks the ability to be a good superintendent. So that was our line of thinking there.
So, my understanding is that there was a previous version of this statute that was litigated maybe 10 years ago, perhaps a bit more, and then the legislature changed that statute and broadened it, right, to include the acquainting with school management and some of those other factors. It was more narrow previously, and it, as I understand it, it's our position that qualifications are somewhat broad. And it seems to me that if the legislature is telling us what the qualifications are, it may not be a good idea to give that discretion to the board, which the board changes over time.
Mhm.
You know, everyone has 3-year terms, and they're subject to reappointment, and that'll change over time. Qualifications change over time, and can you help me understand why the board should have that discretion as opposed to the legislature?
I would make the argument that the board are more subject matter experts probably than the legislature would be. The board, in its current composition, are people who have knowledge specifically of deaf and hard of hearing issues or blind and low vision issues. I think that they are probably in a better position to be able to determine what are the appropriate qualifications, what is really needed, what we're really looking for in a superintendent, rather than maybe a legislator who this particular area may not be his or her specialty.
And David, this is Gibney speaking. In 2015, when we began the interviewing process, the board did struggle with this language and felt it was restrictive and poorly written, and that it needed to be revisited.
This is Suke. I also think part of needing to revisit this is, I think the legislators were looking at the school as a campus as opposed to an agency. And I think that we needed something broader to really address the qualifications needed for somebody to lead an agency of the size and scope of ASDB.
This is Diane Douglas. I think a piece of this, too, comes from looking at our traditional district, our elected school boards. There was an attempt, and I don't remember statute change, how long ago it was, but a lot more latitude was given to elected boards in that they represented the community, and so their restrictions were taken off of them in the hiring of the superintendent, so they could decide whether they thought they needed more of a business manager type, more of a program person type. So I think this kind of reflects for us that same latitude in respect for the more hands-on that we are as a board, as opposed to a much higher level legislative look at it.
Sorry about that.
Are there any more comments on the 1325? 'Cause I have a few other questions on the other statutes, but I just want to make sure there are no other comments on 1325. Okay, seeing none, in terms of 1330, can you explain to me the reasoning behind deleting section B?
The reason behind deleting section B is because the second set of fingerprints are identical to the first set of fingerprints. It is currently slowing down our hiring process, and it's just duplicative. So we are opting to remove that in the interest of hopefully speeding up the hiring process.
And on the first set of fingerprints required under A, there are state and federal criminal record checks that are done during that process as well?
Yes, sir.
So even though obviously the fingerprints would be duplicative, we'd hope they'd be duplicative, the cards themselves anyway, the types of checks, again, being both state and federal, are the same. Is that what you're
Yes,
telling me?
that is my understanding. Yes.
Okay.
So are you needing a motion to approve the suggested changes?
Board member Kniefel, yes, please.
I move that we approve the suggested changes to the Arizona Revised Statute Title 15, Chapter 11, as recommended by ASDB staff Maria Murphy.
Second.
Mr. President, are you still on the line?
Mark?
I think
Dr.
Did we lose
Sims,
him?
are you still on the phone?
Do you have Diane? Oh, we should have Mike. Okay. All those in favor? Say
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
nay.
It has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you taking over?
No.
6.05.
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, exactly.
6.05.
Where are we?
6.05.
6.05, approval of donations. Do we have a,
I move that we approve donations.
And I'll second it.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Those, those opposed? Passed as,
Motion carries.
motion carries. Jump in anytime.
Let's do this by committee.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, it's a group effort. 6.06, discussion and possible action item, future board meeting locations. Ryan?
Board President Sims, if you're still out there somewhere, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman. At the last board meeting, it was requested by the board for staff to investigate several things, including board meeting location options, the possibility of having a board meeting at 2 physical locations, specifically at the PDSD campus as well as the Tucson campus. As part of that, it was suggested that we conduct a survey. I conducted a survey with each of the board members. Those results were disseminated in advance, and so that way you can help you with, in the drawing of your conclusions regarding this. In addition, I had my staff, in conjunction and in partnership with IT, we did a cost analysis, a resource analysis, and a feasibility analysis based on several options. Based on that, we found what we feel is a very highly cost-effective solution that would meet the needs of having high-quality access for the board to communicate, as well as access to the public to feel that they're fully included and have access to the proceedings of board meetings. And so I have filed with you a separate one-page report on the recommendations that we have come to. At the bottom of that, I also included what we strongly felt to optimize the experience for the board, a nominal amount to invest in equipment-wise. The key thing I would like to point out for this proposed solution is you require essentially a technology device called New Tech Talk Show, which will just allow us, for situations just like this, where we have multiple people calling in on the phone, several people in person, and possibly others participating through Skype, a higher quality video and audio experience for everyone involved, both those physically at the board meeting location, as well as those who are participating remotely. And so what is proposed in the bottom is that specific setup and how that would look. What are the benefits of this versus the existing system of going to Tucson, right, and meeting in a room, is it takes it to the next level in terms of accessibility. Skype is a voice over IP system, and therefore some of the difficulty we've experienced has to do with the quality of phone calls. You know, even tonight we've experienced some different fidelity issues in terms of for cell phones, other phones losing battery. The benefit of a VoIP system is it's connected to the internet. And for this particular solution, I want to point out though, you can't have multiple people Skyping from several locations. They would still need to be in a centralized spot. However, the flexibility of this option is that it doesn't have to be on the Tucson campus. That one spot could be anywhere else in the Phoenix metro area or anywhere else in the state for that matter. And so those are some of the benefits of that solution. And so at this time, based on the survey results that were submitted, the one-page recommended solution, do any members of the board have any questions regarding what has been proposed?
This is Bill Gibney. Ryan, what was the cost of your proposal?
It was just an additional $4,500. The other proposal that was brought forth, just to clarify, put this in context, was having it at 2 locations. That would have, at minimum, doubled the cost. We would have needed twice as many staff. We would have needed twice as many cameras, twice as many interpreters, twice as many. I'd have to hire a new camera operator each time, and it required the experience itself would have been less than optimal. And to explain that, right now, as you view, we have an interpreter and a screen. If you had it at 2 physical locations, imagine a screen cut in half vertically, and each one has a picture-in-a-picture. So for viewing purposes for participants at large, you'd essentially have 4 very cluttered screens within one to try to access the board. And so we felt that certainly was not an optimal solution. So that's in contrast to a $4,500 solution that should help out. The other thing I want to point out, because this is important, it was mentioned by Board President Sims, I'm not sure if he's available, but I want to point it out for his benefit, was what about audience participation? I would like to point out the valuable nature of streams. Before, obviously, people had to show up in person. Now, 95% plus of all participants, excluding staff, participate either by watching the live stream or a recorded session at a later point in time. And so there's very few people, to be honest, a handful, who are non-staff who show up in person nowadays. They mostly access through the live stream.
So this proposal really would be offered in lieu of us actually getting together as a body.
Yeah, the way it would work is we would still have the physical board locations. It was proposed, there was many options. Remember in the survey results, there were several options put forth. The leading idea was to have, based on the survey results, was to have a 1 location solution. And that would be based on the results of the survey at Phoenix Day School for the Deaf. That was primarily based on that fact that 8 of 9 board members live in the Phoenix metropolitan area. Mike Gordon certainly lives in the Tucson area. And based on the results of the survey, indicated that people were far more likely to participate in person if it was consistently held in Phoenix. As we've discussed before, why is that important? The quality of the experience for participants based on current technology and the costs that we use to update that, it goes down. The more people who participate remotely, the lower the quality of the experience for all involved. Particularly, I would say, for Superintendent Reichman, in her needs, the more people can meet in person, the better. However, knowing that, we said, what's the next best solution if people do have to participate remotely? That's what this $4,500 goes to Board Member Gibney. That talks about for $4,500, we can have a high-quality solution where people can still congregate in one location and participate remotely as well. So here's how the vision of it would be. Most people hopefully can make the board meeting in person. If they couldn't, those board members could have the option to participate in person using video conference, and they would see the live stream. We'd have an additional monitor in front of the board as well as the superintendent, so you can watch people who are remotely, as they participate as well.
Ryan, I've noticed today that the streaming live is delayed by 30 or 40 seconds. Wouldn't that affect those in person versus those on video? That you'd be getting the feed later than the people in person?
That would potentially be an issue if there is continues to be a delay, because as you point out, it depends upon the reliability of the internet service. And of course, that's never a fixed thing. There are intermittent issues. We go through the state of Arizona services, and sometimes there are outages, as Steve would, to my left, the assistant director of IT would point out, and there are often small delays anyway. So you're right, that would affect that quality of experience.
Well, for what it's worth, board, my opinion, this is Gibney speaking, my opinion is, I mean, sometimes we have to call in telephonically, I certainly have, but I really like the face-to-face participation, and I'm afraid that this would just give us an opportunity to abuse the system and not appear so that we're all present face-to-face.
This is Suke. I'm not sure that I'm getting that same sense. I'm hearing this as more of, since most of us are here in Phoenix, we would still be expected, if possible, to attend in person, but we would have a set location for the meetings instead of traveling from place to place. And from my own experience, I have found that when I've gone to other locations for the board meetings, sometimes I'm the only one there in person. So I actually am in favor of this as an option. I think it's a good alternative to make sure that we at least have some connectivity between the two major locations. And it allows people to participate remotely if necessary.
So would we still have meetings in Tucson or Flagstaff?
Right now, you had approved meetings between Phoenix and Tucson. So for example, the next full board meeting, I just looked at my calendars on March 9th, and that's scheduled to be in Tucson, unless you decide to vote to change that.
So if we were to accept this proposal, that means how would that affect the Tucson meeting for March 9th?
Let me explain the results. I think Board Member Gibney, that might help clarify the board's thinking. The way it worked out when I sent out the results, one of the options was to have, or there's several options, have meetings exclusively at PDSD, and that was chosen by 4 out of the 8 participants in the survey as their favorite option. The other option that, interestingly enough, came that tied with that, or nearly so, was the option of rotating equally around the state. So that was that. However, to clarify that point of view, I asked a follow-up question. It was this. That being said, that's preferred model, who is more likely to show up in person with each of these options? And Yuma came dead last in terms of people's likelihood of showing up. Flagstaff was second in terms of being very unlikely to show up. Alternating between Phoenix and Tucson was also very unlikely. The one consensus, one area of consensus nearly, with the exception of one, I believe, participant on the survey, was having them in Phoenix would by far have the greatest likelihood of more people showing up. And if the intent is to have more people show up because it creates a better experience, that was our recommendation then, was to have a fixed location of PDSD, be the place, since 8 of 9 people are based out of the Phoenix area. And then there's other alternate ways to access meetings remotely. That could be telephonically, or as we were asked to explore, some type of video conferencing solution for those in Tucson, as Mike Gordon has utilized in the past when you guys have had executive session conversations.
So if we had all the meetings here in Phoenix, your proposal, would your proposal be just then for a video conferencing in Tucson for one person?
It could be anywhere, because currently with our current technology, it has to be Tucson. However, with this $4,500 solution, that would be flexible. It just has to be it has to be everyone coming together in a centralized location who is participating remotely regardless. For instance, it could be in Tucson, a different part of Phoenix. It's flexible.
So in Phoenix, we could have a group of people meeting here and a group of people meeting someplace else in the valley.
Yeah, let's say, for instance, that as an example, let's say, Dr. Sims and Diane Douglas were both in the East Valley for events they're participating in. Maybe David Nigro was there as well. They could say, hey guys, let's all get together in a central location using our solution through Skype with connection to the internet, right? A laptop, for instance. You could all join the session remotely and not have to be in Tucson only. It gives you more flexibility.
I just think that would be rare. The valley's so
Ryan?
large.
Yes.
This is Diane Douglas. Would a solution like that preclude us to call in? Because it's ironic that I'm not there. I mean, if I could be there, I would be there. But for me today to get to another location was not possible either.
Yes.
So could we still have the option that we can call in by telephone?
Yes, and beyond the solution addressing the ability to remotely participate, not just in Tucson, but anywhere else theoretically, right? As long as everyone who's participating remotely is in the same spot, you can still participate independent of that telephonically. The specific equipment, the new Talk Show VS100, would just make it a higher quality experience for everyone regardless if you decide to participate remotely or not. It's a higher tech system that improves the quality of the current sound today. It should hopefully improve the quality of people calling in on the telephone as well. In terms of the visual dynamics, if we hook it into monitors, it would improve that too. It's just essentially allows you for a more optimal experience than currently what my sound crew have. It's a very limited option that, as you experience, calls coming in and out, we don't have the technology to provide the higher level of audio and visual is why. So regardless, it'd be a good upgrade, essentially.
Sounds like a good investment to me.
This is
Gordon.
Shelley speaking. I'd like to make a comment. I have to say, with deaf culture, we need more of that visual connection with people. And if we just all call in, we lose that, and we are disconnecting from the community. I think that we need to be here. And if we're just here at PDSD all the time, what happens to Tucson? What happens to Flagstaff? What happens to Yuma? I feel like we'll lose those connections, and it'll be almost as if we're neglecting those people. Those are our people. I don't feel that this is a right solution, and this is not a good solution for us. We need to meet in person.
Well, Ryan, just to
Yes.
clarify, if we were to purchase this solution, it wouldn't preclude us from having a meeting in Yuma or Flagstaff. We could set this the satellite up in Phoenix.
Correct.
And still have board members in one of those other remote locations.
Yeah, and that's the advantage is, once again, the flexibility of the system. You're absolutely right. Board member Nigro, if you had a meeting in Flagstaff after the board decided to do that, then you have the option of setting up the system in Phoenix for people to participate that way. Once again, the only detriment to that, as I think Board President Sims brought up last time, was if the issue is we're trying to have it more in person, it certainly helps the access level for Superintendent Reichman tremendously. Because this report was created and also in discussion with her needs as requested. So.
Right. So I guess my point is,
Yes.
there's really there's not one question. There's two questions. One, should we go with the solution to have some different access and allow some more remote interaction, and then two, how we set the agenda, or where the meetings are, is a separate question.
Correct.
And maybe we can discuss this during our board retreat. Is this a topic we can discuss?
So that means if you don't make a decision today, then the next full board meeting will be in Tucson
And that's fine.
on March, what day did I say?
March 9th.
9th. And we just go ahead with the Tucson board meeting in March.
I think this is one of these things just, because we're talking about technology, it sounds good, it looks good on paper, but I just don't think it's very practical. And I don't think it's worth spending $4,500 on. I'd rather meet in person.
This is UK Kneifel. I'm wondering, is it possible at the board retreat, if we decide to table it until that point, is it possible at the board retreat to have some kind of demonstration of the technology, you know, so that we could maybe have a better, more informed choice?
Wouldn't have the equipment.
But, I mean, would a representative from this company be willing to come in and demo their equipment to us possibly?
I think that's something I would definitely need to look into with my staff to see if that would be a possibility or not.
Okay.
I just don't, without speaking with the representatives from that company, you know, and plus it's not just one piece of equipment, it's really several pieces of equipment that we have to buy independently to make it work.
And I don't know that it needs to be a live demo, if they even
Okay.
had something
Yeah.
that we could,
In video.
you know, have described via video or something to that effect.
Yeah, we do have video that I can I can email each member of the board in advance of the board retreat, if that would help you in your decision regarding this process.
So Ryan, how would that work today, for example? We have Mike in Tucson, Mark in one location here in Phoenix, Diane in another location here in Phoenix. How would your proposal work?
Essentially, the way it works now is, I think there's a lot of ideals about everyone meeting in person, but based on the analytics of actual board participation through the last several cycles, board member Gibbs, that hasn't been the reality. And so, going back to issue one that David Niagara brought up, the intent was if we could have more people show up because they're more likely to attend, for instance, having a centralized location in Phoenix, that was that first proposal. The second proposal you're referring to about technology was just, you know, Mike Gordon brought up last time is, you know, what was brought up last time to clarify was Board President Sims said explore the option, staff, of having a physical location, right, at two different physical locations for a board meeting. So essentially all staff could be at Tucson and Phoenix. That wasn't feasible. So what this does instead would be the next best, and that is people could meet in a centralized location anywhere throughout the state. You would be in a room. You would have access to we have video conference rooms in Tucson, and we can set up somewhere else. You'd be watching through the internet on your laptop, for instance, or a big screen as a team, a couple people at once. You would watch the live stream as it proceeds and hear the audio. You would then, for your part, be speaking into the Skype, right, which is a voice over IP, but it also allows you to be captured on a camera from the computer monitor. So therefore, your image then would appear to the board members who are here present.
Now, I understand all that, but if Superintendent Douglas couldn't get here today, what makes you think she could get to some other remote location? Or Dr. Sims, what makes you think he could leave his office and get to some other remote location?
I think the primary benefit, as expressed at the last board meeting, was in consideration of board member Gordon, who certainly he's based out of Tucson. He currently uses, or any other board member for that matter, it'd be a higher level of experience was the goal. So versus just having over the phone, which we know mobile phones are highly unreliable, but yet it's not practical if you're traveling to always have access to a mobile phone. The fidelity of rather a landline. So this was proposed as an alternate solution. We set up a hub People can go there, travel to.
But what if they can't get to the hub? What good does it do us?
In that case, they would still need to participate telephonically.
So we would spend $4,500 to have it at the hub, and maybe one person would show up.
I think the true cost of this, particularly the voice over IP system, would be about $2,000. The rest of the cost, if you break it down by item, there's still another $1,500 or so that just goes to optimizing the experience regardless of the option. What I mean by that is $2,000 for this voice over IP system setup. The other cost really is associated with just enhancing the experience over the phone. Sometimes during this, even today's session, phone calls go in and out. And so that part of the $4,500 total, right, disaggregate that from the total, would go to improving the experience regardless of the options that the board chooses.
My suggestion is to table this discussion. I will call Dr. Sims and see if he wants to include this on the agenda for the retreat. I don't think it fits with his vision of what's going to happen during that time. But definitely we'll follow up with you. But for now, I would recommend this be tabled.
This is Suke Kneifel. I move that we table this until either the board retreat or the March 9th meeting, whichever is more feasible.
This is
Second.
Lynn. Okay.
This is Gordon. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yep.
I'd like to add one more thing before we vote on this, and this is just from my level of participation. When you're talking about video conferencing as compared to live streaming and cell phone participation, right? Like right now, I'm in my office, I'm on my cell phone, but I'm watching online live. Now it's a little disjointed because of the delay, like Bill mentioned, and Ryan explained the process. So it is kind of hard to follow in real time. Well, because it is in real time. But when I've had to participate in executive session, when I was at ASDB Tucson campus, when we were in the superintendent selection process, and it was real time, I thought that coming to the office, coming to the hub, and being able to see everything live was very effective. And in some ways, actually gave me a unique perspective of seeing everyone's reaction, of being able to really participate in a way that's even a little different than being there. So before I think we just all kind of accept that being all in one room is a better way to participate. I think there's other things to view, and I don't like necessarily participating remotely. However, in so many days, 5 hours or more in the car for a couple-hour meeting, it's hard for me to be able to get away. So I just wanted to put that out there before we table it and then either use the time at the retreat to discuss it, or we go into the Tucson meeting, which actually I won't even be at. I'm going to be out of town and won't be able to participate.
You have to participate remotely.
So to some degree, that's why I wanted to bring it up now, because from what I have seen and the way I've participated from the two-hub approach from the superintendent's building, I personally think it's worked pretty well.
Yeah, but Mike, you're a party of one in Tucson. It's easy to get you together in one spot. We have a valley down here. It's so large.
But there's also staff and there's other people in Tucson who could participate from that hub also. People either from the public and or certainly folks that participate now that come up from Tucson.
Isn't that generally done at the school on the school campus, though?
Yeah. Yes.
That's where I participated in executive session both times, and like I said, it worked out well.
Ryan, can I ask one more question before we vote to table this? Could we, apart from the video conferencing, for those that do have to call in for various reasons and aren't able to get to that second hub, if we approve that, could we look into a voice service provider that supports voice over IP or so-called high-definition calling. I know there's some teleconference providers out there that do that, and it makes the quality of the voice a lot better.
Okay.
We can talk about it offline if you need to, but it's kind of like when you call two Verizon phones that together, it sounds like you're in the same room, and there are conference providers that support that.
Board Member Nigro, I'm going to consult with IT. They oversee our phone systems and our negotiations in conjunction with the state of Arizona's current technology, and I'll see what solution that they can help propose and bring that to the board's attention. The other thing I do want to point out is to address, I was just informed by my staff member to address Board Member Gibney's concern about the 30-second delay was this solution, this $4,500 solution would mitigate that delay, and it would be a real-time video stream.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion that's been seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. All those opposed,
Nay.
the motion passes.
The motion to table, correct?
The motion to
Yes.
table,
Yeah.
thank you. The motion to table pass. Okay. Yeah. Call to the public. On non-agenda items, I have one call from the public. Astrid Goodstein. Astrid, are you ready? Letitia? Okay. And a reminder, you have 3 minutes. I will give you a 1-minute warning.
Okay. As a representative of a large community, I just wanted on the record that the community really appreciates the leadership of Ms. Annette Reichman and for the request for funding from the government's office, which is now on the agenda for legislative action. We want to commend her. We are very excited. I want to thank Zoe and Matea. I don't think that they could say it any better about how early language acquisition and access to language really benefits kids for their futures. It makes them be productive, law-abiding leaders for tomorrow. Really, it just speaks to the value and the importance of early language intervention. So I'm very excited to work with Superintendent Reichman on that issue.
Thank you. 1-minute warning. Okay, on to item 8.01. Does anyone have a motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Joanne, are you here?
Yeah.
Oh, you're here. Okay.